Extras! Originally, I tried to cover the whole 3-evening 4-way battle in a single TDDC, but I kept cutting and cutting stuff and could not get it down to the 15-minute maximum I'm shooting for with the series. Yes, number 4 went over, but that was an awesome session, and I cut out a lot of the stuff that happened before the orcs showed up. Anyway, what I'm saying is there was so much stuff from the Bob battle that didn't make the episodes. Early in the battle, Draven cast See and Viz to get a better picture of Bob's forces. Now, as an artificer, he works a little differently from a wizard. He had infusions rather than spells, and they're called infusions because he can't just cast them directly by waving his hands around. Instead, unless he's buffing a construct, he has to infuse them into an item and then use that item to cast a spell, sort of like a one-charge magic wand. Many infusions take a full minute to prepare, way too long for combat, meaning the artificer has to prepare more in advance, which is hard because some of his abilities have a small XP cost to them. To help with this, artificers can spend an action point to do their infusions in a single round, but action points are a feature of the Eberron campaign setting that I wasn't really including. Instead, I gave artificers, like Draven, an ability which he warned me was probably a little overpowered, that let him use the action point power once per day and gain an additional use per day at level 5. So anyway, all this means that it took him 2 rounds to cast See and Viz. 1 round to infuse it using his action point thingy, and then 1 standard action to cast it in the next round. When he finished, he could see a number of invisible KTs stuck in the entangle, a few more who the spell had missed, circling around towards the warbond, and 1 lighter armored Illud scout who is not 10 feet away from Draven. The scout, with his crazily acute Kuatoan vision, could see Draven's eyes change focus, gave him a big creepy grin, then disappeared into the forest. That didn't make it in episode 2, but it is part of the reason for this line in episode 3. And then he ducks into the forest, because apparently that's the hip place to be for today's stealthy warrior. The Druidbarian is an NPC build I came up with a long time ago, and I'm probably not the only one. Basically, if you, for some reason, wanted to kill a level 1 to 3 player character with a monster of an appropriate challenge rating, consider this. A level 1 Barbarian, level 1 Druid with 15 dexterity can take 2-weapon fighting. They cast Shillelagh to turn their staff into a double weapon, equivalent to a +1 greatsword on each side, then Rage. Suddenly, this challenge rating 2 enemy, that is, one who counts as a hard boss fight at level 1, and an average fight for a level 2 party, and 2 of them would be considered a challenging encounter for 3rd level PCs. This guy has a horrible AC, but lots of hit points, gets 2 attacks per round at +3 or +4 to hit, and does 2d6 +4 damage a hit, and you get a wolf or other basic animal companion for free. He can also open the fight by casting Entangle before he rages, which could prevent half the party from acting effectively. No, I've never used this to slaughter low-level PCs. It's a thought experiment. The Druidbarian build does not scale up worth a damn, and as a player character, you would very rapidly reach the point where you wish you'd gone straight Druid instead. But buffing them slightly with 1 extra level, the 2 Druidbarians the Warbond brought along did a pretty good amount of damage to Black and Little One before going down. Enough damage that, as much as the party didn't really want to hurt humans in defense of Kuatoa, they felt pressured enough that they didn't want to pull their punches with the -4 penalty it takes to deal non-lethal damage. Not against these 2, anyway. It didn't help that the wolves rolled really well on their trip checks, and the players really badly. So badly, in fact, that when Little One got pissed off and tried to give one of the Druidbarians a taste of their own medicine, not only did he not succeed in tripping, but against all odds he managed to get counter-tripped. In the end, they made a value judgment that after killing the wolves, these guys probably couldn't have been reasoned with later on, so they just had to kill them in self-defense, rather than risking themselves even more by trying to knock them out. The Warbond minions were a little on the weak side, but strong enough that with average die rolls they could certainly put out some damage against the heroes. However, they did virtually nothing to the KT warriors because they have a supremely high armor class for their level. Kua have a +6 natural armor bonus, meaning their scaly hide is better than chainmail, but Armor in 3rd edition D&D is a different kind of bonus than natural armor, and it stacks. With a breastplate and heavy shield, they end up with a 23 armor class, which means an average level 6 fighter who has around +10 to hit is missing them 2/3 of the time. And anyone less focused on hitting, like a rogue or unbuffed cleric, will do even worse. What made it really sad was that AC 23 is an average KT warrior. Bob's men were slightly better, and they had an AC of 25, so that instead of only hitting on an 18 or higher, the Warbond crossbowgoers now needed a natural 20, which is why the Elude forces didn't suffer a single casualty from them. Bob is not a combat guy. He's about the same level as the PCs were at the time, but more of his levels are in the noble NPC class than in any, good class. He didn't have a shield or any armor beyond his scales, and he was immediately fairy-fired and entangled, so it's no surprise that he didn't really do much except shout orders in Kuar. Except later on in the fight, when the party had shown that they were clearly helping protect Bob, he started calling out in common as well. Just occasional warnings like, "Watch your flank," or "Watch your left side." But they made little of it until one of the Deluvians barely hit Little One. It was like, "What's your AC?" "Okay." Bob calls out, "Dog!" And you do, and you barely manage to avoid his sword. Like it totally hit your AC, but it missed by 1 anyway. Almost as though Bob were a marshal who was extending his +1 AC aura to you guys. And Draven was like, "Oh, that was really well telegraphed." But Little One was like, "So he's not as non-combat as he seems." You may be wondering what exactly wiped out those Warbond minions as the Deluvians stormed over the ridge, and how the heck Deluvian leader was Spider-Manning around the battlefield. First, before cresting the ridge, the Deluvian stormtroopers each tossed over a lightning ball. Each lightning ball is a metal-shelled alchemical device which can be tossed into a 5-foot square as a standard action. Doing so breaks an internal glass barrier. Once the glass inside is broken, it takes 1 round for the chemicals to mix, after which the ball carries a dangerous electric charge for up to 5 rounds. During that time, the first creature to move within 5 feet of the ball triggers an electrical discharge that zaps them for 2d4 electrical damage. Reflex 11 for half, dealing 1 electrical splash damage to any adjacent creature. The zap is not triggered by grounded creatures, meaning any creature with electrical resistance 5 or higher. If multiple active lightning balls are triggered at the same time, so they go off with overlapping areas of effect, they interfere with each other enough that the damage does not increase, even though all the balls are still expended. A creature carrying 1 or more lightning balls who fails any reflex save must make an additional reflex save at the same DC to avoid accidentally triggering any carried lightning balls. My interpretation of the invisibility rule is that throwing out the little metal grenades does not break invis, but the spell is broken when they go off, because that clearly constitutes an attack, which is why the Deluvians all appeared the way they did. The Elude have lightning balls too, but Bob's men did not, because the things are expensive and tend to go off by accident. You don't carry them around unless you are planning a slaughter, whereas Kuatoa have refined their flasks, the Alchemist Fire and Acid flasks, enough that most of their soldiers carry 1 of each. When you want to get around in style, though, and don't care how much it costs, there's the Whipvine tube. Whipvine is an alchemically treated plant crafted by Kuatoa of House Domond for quick escapes and tactical repositioning. The strand is modified and compressed into a driftwood tube with a screw top. Some versions are designed so that you can hold it at the bottom and twist to open the top. When opened, it shoots out with an incredible energy, though it lacks the mass to inflict relevant damage if used as a weapon. As a standard action, you make a touch attack, usually against an inanimate terrain feature, with a range increment of 20, maximum range 60 feet. If it hits, the goo ball at the end of the strand attaches firmly for a few seconds, and the vine springs back, reeling in the wielder if you can hold on. Reflex 13, on a failed save, the tube is ripped out of your hand. Alternatively, the Whipvine can be used to reel in an unattended item that weighs less than half as much as the wielder. Whipvine may have a variety of other uses, but they generally require specialized skills. In other words, you have to spend a feat. The tubes cost 200 gold pieces each, though reusable models, effectively a magic item version, are rumored to exist. Little One in Black reasoned that if the Whipvine was that strong, it should be able to reel in enemies, like Scorpion, or they should be able to launch themselves directly at a foe as an attack. I didn't have a good justification for why you couldn't, just that they were not designed to be used that way. Theoretically, being alchemical rather than real magic, it's closer to obeying real physics, and therefore harder to say it just doesn't work that way. Eventually, the issues sort of went away without any satisfactory resolution, because they didn't find that many unused Whipvine tubes, and as single-use consumables, they really weren't worth the price to make them. Finally, at the end of the battle, when Angel killed the leader, there was actually still a Deluvian warrior alive, and he tried to run away, over the ridge and down a steep slope. Black was actually the closest one to him, but he's slow as hell, because of the aptly named slow flaw. At the time, we all thought you could cast Expeditious Retreat as a touch spell. The range is actually personal, meaning self-only, but we used it wrong for weeks before looking it up. So Angel cast it on Black, and suddenly he was way faster than a fish in medium armor, and he started chasing the KT. And the Deluvian failed a balance check and tripped on a steep slope, started to roll all the way down. And then Black failed a balance check and tripped on a steep slope and started rolling all the way down after him. When they both stood up at the bottom, Black was so much faster with the buff that he actually ran all the way around in front of the Kuatoa before smacking the fishman. Before feeding the fishman a perfunctory flail to the face. Oh, and I can't believe I almost forgot to include it again. But the #1 piece of feedback I got from the players about TDDC is they can't believe I forgot to include the phrase, "too dumb to live," with regards to Jimmy Patel, the war bond leader. It's not that they decided he had to die. It was really more of a Darwin Award situation. Anyway, that's about it for this TDC Extras, but I've got episode 5 recorded, so with any luck, I can finish it this week. In the meantime, you should subscribe to me on Twitter, and go like my new Facebook page.